Good afternoon, everybody. I am Dr. Sridhar Raj from Institute of Public Enterprise, Hyderabad. Now, today we are going to understand the public enterprises course as a part of public administration. Public enterprise consists of various modules, and one of the module is forms of different public enterprises. What are these forms of public enterprises, and how many forms do we have? What are the differentiating factors we have for each of the public enterprise? Is each public enterprise different from other enterprise? In case that difference is there, what type of differentiators are there which can lead to their effectiveness and efficiency in performing their goals? Now, are these public enterprises established with some specific goals in different formats, or are the goals same, so that the same objectives are being pursued by different public enterprises? We have basically three types of public enterprises. What are they? The first one is departmental form of public enterprise. Now, what is this departmental form of public enterprise? Departmental form of public enterprise is an enterprise which is absolutely managed by government. Okay, the control of the government is 100%. It is owned by the government to the tune of 100%. There is no participation from the private individuals or corporate world. And the next one is public corporation. What is this corporation? Public corporation is also a government entity. However, there are certain parameters which differentiate a public enterprise and a public corporation. A public corporation is also, as I told you earlier, is a government entity completely owned by a government. However, the major difference is in public corporation, the corporations are given some autonomy and flexibility with regard to day-to-day decisions. It means that as far as some regular activities are concerned, the public corporations can act decisively on their behalf themselves. In fact, the autonomy itself speaks volumes of their operations. There are n number of public enterprises which have lot of operational freedom and autonomy in taking their day-to-day decisions. However, public corporations again are subjected to the control of the government through various forms that we'll discuss later. The next one is the government company. So what is a government company? Government company is again one form of public enterprise. It is again distinguished by the corporation form and the departmental form. The departmental form, as I stated earlier, is very rigid in its operations. The public corporation is a bit flexible, and the government corporation is more flexible in terms of its establishment and closure. Okay, so these are the major forms of public enterprises. Now, what we do is we will try to understand each of the public enterprise in detail. What are the characteristic features of each public enterprise form, and also the merits and demerits, and we'll try to understand the larger implications of the idea behind how we establish a public enterprise, right? And the objectives, let us see the major objectives. Before we try to understand is the background. Background is very important of why different forms of public enterprise were established. When public enterprises were established in India, in fact, the country was mostly agrarian in nature. There were no major enterprises. When India got independence, there are only 5 enterprises in India, public enterprise. However, over a period of time, different forms of public enterprise came into picture. The nature of functions of the government or the nature of functions of the society also entailed or forced the government to adopt different forms of corporations or different forms of probably companies and also departmental undertakings. There were some departmental undertakings which have been established by the British government, and they continued even today. The good example is Indian Railways. Indian Railways is one example where we find the departmental form of undertaking is functioning very effectively and efficiently in meeting the needs of the country from time to time. Okay, now coming to the aspect of the background of different forms of enterprises, the one area is agrarian nature of the country, as earlier explained. The dominance of agrarian economy before the independence forced the government to have to set up different forms of public enterprises. The other reason being there was no major industrial base in the country. In fact, most of the government activities were functioning through departmental undertakings. That's it. And the private sector was not very active in enrolling itself as entrepreneurs, and enterprises were lagging behind the private sector. And the major problem for public enterprise was there was no financial resources. In fact, government was the only investor who was investing in public enterprise, whereas in fact there are one or two enterprises from the private sector. One example is Tatas for investing in different enterprises, whereas no major enterprise came forward to invest in enterprise. That was one of the concerns of the government, which forced the government to go for different forms of enterprises in the initial days of independence. And that apart, India is a very wide and large country with diverse social and economic background. The social and economic background made the government to think about the regional development issues. There were some regions which were very developed, there were some regions which were not well developed, and there were some regions which are absolutely having no development. It is this reason which made the government to think about regional implications of the public sector enterprises. And also different forms of enterprises were established in different areas. That apart, a central public sector was broken into different pieces and established in different areas so as to address the regional imbalances of the country. And after some time, if you look at the history of the public enterprises and their contribution to society and economy, we see that the regional implications or the regional understanding of the public enterprise at the time of establishment has really contributed to the overall growth of the country. For example, if you take BHEL is one enterprise which is spread over many areas in the country. So the establishment of BHEL in different places itself has led to the development of various ancillary industries in and around BHEL. One good example is in Hyderabad, BHEL has a unit around which hundreds of ancillary units have developed, which in turn have provided lot of employment to the people in the area. This is one of the contributions of the public sector enterprises. And that apart, these public enterprises have also contributed to the development of the country in other ways, like direct or indirect social benefits to the people through indirect employment. And another reason which forced the government to go for different forms of public enterprise was there were semi-skilled labor, and the government wanted to pull the semi-skilled or unskilled labor from agriculture to industries, because at that point of time industries were concerned to be the areas where they could pull or they could provide more employment to the people. As agrarian country, we were not even providing a lot of employment opportunities to the people, and the industries came very handy. So, and the private sector, as it was not able to provide employment to the people, it was the responsibility of the government to provide employment. As private sector was not able to provide enough employment to the people, it was the task of the government to provide employment by establishing industries in the form of public enterprises. And we find it is in this context that we find different forms of public enterprises have been established government in different parts of the country to address various needs of the people from time to time. Now, let us try to understand the different forms of public enterprises as discussed in the initial beginning of the lecture. Now, one of the important forms of public enterprises is departmental form of public enterprise. Now, what is this departmental form of enterprise? How is it established? What are the reasons for the establishment of departmental form of public enterprises? These public enterprises are, as stated earlier, are owned by the government. The government itself establishes the departmental form of enterprises to cater to various needs of the country, and there is not much profit orientation as far as departmental form of public enterprise is concerned. Now, for example, if we take railways is of national importance. Which because it connects the eastern part to the western part, the northern part to the southern part. So in fact, it is a gridlock, and without Indian railways, India cannot make much progress. And this was established as a form of departmental enterprise so that country can achieve overall growth in the days to come. And to a large extent, the departmental form of public enterprises have contributed to the overall growth of the country. Next, the goods and services which are of strategic importance are also located in departmental form of public enterprises. For example, ordnance factories in India are a part of or under established on departmental form of public enterprise, for a simple reason that ordnance factories cannot be established by the private parties. Of course, now after liberalization, now there's slow entry of private players into the ordnance factories, in the sense that they are also into arms and ammunition manufacturing by the recent order of the government of India. However, otherwise, ordnance factories are the goods and services which are of strategic importance, also come under part of this departmental form of public enterprise. And that apart, those goods and services which are of popular importance, for example, India Post. Earlier it was post office, now it is India Post. Now India Post is one area which was again established as a form of departmental public enterprise. Departmental public enterprise means it is in this context that India Post serves the nation. India Post has more than probably 1,50,000 post offices across the country which serve or which connect even the rural areas from the urban areas. And this is one of the advantages of departmental form public enterprise, where irrespective of the profit orientation, they serve the country from a larger and holistic perspective which cannot be served by other forms of enterprises. So this form of enterprise helps the country and the government in specific to reach to the masses and also serve the nation from a holistic perspective. And there are some services which are of great importance as far as communication is concerned. For example, AIR, it means that All India Radio and Doordarshan. Earlier, when there were not many channels as far as entertainment is concerned, Doordarshan was the only channel which used to provide communication, information and entertainment. And that apart, All India Radio was another important agency which provided the much required information, or it also disseminated the much required information to the people in rural areas. If you take the case of Doordarshan, it provides so many programs pertaining to rural people, farmers and agriculturalists, which help them in reaping huge benefits directly and indirectly. If you take the case of Air India or All India Radio, it also served the purpose of strategic importance, in the sense that whenever there were disasters, whenever there was a communication which has to be communicated to the people, All India Radio helped the people in understanding the message for their own purposes. Next, if you try to understand what exactly are the benefits of public enterprises, what exactly the characteristic features of the departmental form public enterprise. Departmental form public, as told earlier, it is owned by government. Absolute ownership is rested in the government, and as far as pricing, expansion, employment opportunities, all those concerned, they are to be governed by the government rules right from the inception stage. There cannot be any deviation. They are also subjected to the audit of the Comptroller and Auditor General of India from time to time. The ministry is responsible for the functioning of departmental form public enterprises, and also the minister is responsible for the department in the parliament also. All the parliamentary questions concerning the railway ministry or the ministries concerning the departmental form of public enterprises is given by the respective ministers, and the respective minister also administers the overall policy guidelines to the department form of public enterprise. For example, if the railway minister has to be, if the railways have to expand into different areas or to increase their broad gauge area or coverage, or to develop more stations, or to provide more accessories or benefits to the people or passengers, then it is the responsibility of the railway ministers and give policy direction from time to time. The best part of this departmental form of public enterprise is the government can control the public enterprises or departmental form of enterprises in totality, which is not possible either in public corporation or in government companies, because the departmental form of public enterprise is basically established to cater to the needs of the people from time to time and from a larger perspective, which helps the nation. The best example, as I stated earlier, is again Indian Railways, India Post or ordnance factories. These are the services which are very much required for the country in understanding how the country runs and also how the country is connected from different areas or within different areas. Now, these are the major advantages of departmental form of public enterprises. It is established by government. The minister heads or provides a policy direction wherever it is required. Now, as a part of ministry, the departmental form of public enterprise functions. It cannot be detached from the ministry. It is a part and parcel of the ministry concerned. That apart, the best advantage of this one is budgetary support is provided by the government after taking the parliamentary approval, which is not possible again in the other two forms of public enterprises. Parliamentary control is essential because each rupee that goes into the spending of the departmental form of public enterprise comes from the taxpayers' money, and this taxpayers' money is allocated again by the government to meet the needs of these departmental form of public enterprises. Now, coming to the advantages, there are numerous advantages of departmental form of public enterprises. The basic advantage, as I told you earlier, is the fulfillment of socio-economic goals, which is not possible in other two forms. It's not that public corporations do not fulfill the socio-economic goals. They also fulfill. But the advantage here is the departmental form of enterprise can be completely oriented to meet the overall socio-economic needs of the country. For example, India Post is one organization which with its setup can reach the rural masses all over the country, which is not possible either in public corporation form or through government company. So this is the most important advantage of the departmental form of public enterprise, which is not possible in public corporation or government company. So socio-economic goals can be fulfilled directly and indirectly. The other one is the parliamentary control. The parliament is the custodian of the national resources and also the national ideals which are enshrined in the Constitution of India. The parliamentary control is essential for the simple reason that all the money that goes into departmental form of public enterprises that comes from the government of India or consolidated fund of India, which is not possible again in public corporations. So the parliamentary control ensures that these bodies or these departmental form of enterprises function in accordance with the ideals enshrined in the Constitution of India or the policy directions which are enshrined by the government of the day. Regional development is another one of the important benefits of departmental form of public enterprises, in the sense that the departmental form of public enterprises are being established all over the country to cater to the socio-economic needs of the people. And if we take the 50 years of progress of public enterprises, we find that these public enterprises or departmental form of public enterprises have contributed immensely to the growth of the country. This was not possible in other form of enterprises. And the other one is these public enterprise or departmental form of public enterprise are more resource focused. They are very efficient in utilizing the resources because the parliamentary control is there from time to time, and every year they have to submit a report to the minister concerned. The minister concerned will ensure that the report is placed before the parliament. So these sort of controls, regulations, guidance and policy initiatives the government of India makes these departmental form of public enterprises more efficient and more effective in catering to the needs of the country and also the people, particularly the socio-economic needs of the people. The good examples are the Indian Railways, Indian Post and the ordnance factories. Now coming to the demerits of the departmental form public enterprise, one finds that there is too much bureaucratic control which hinders the speed and effective decisions in operations. Indian Railways is one more example where we find sometimes the decisions are taken a bit slow, which impairs its efficiency. So one disadvantage is bureaucratic control, which needs to be lessened or which needs to be loosened so that these departmental form of public enterprises function more effectively. And sometimes there can be areas where the parliament can become more zealous in controlling the affairs of departmental form of public enterprises, which curtails the operational and autonomy of the departmental form of public enterprises. And there is a criticism that the departmental form of public enterprise often lacks the specialists who can deliver the goods, which is possible in public corporation. But whereas in departmental form of public enterprise, we don't find specialists to the core who can deliver the results to meet the organizational needs. And the most disadvantage factor for these departmental form is the lack of flexibility. Everything needs to be governed by the laws and rules and regulations of the government from time to time, which impairs the overall efficiency and effectiveness of the departmental firm. However, all said and done, one can find that these are the enterprise, or this is a form of enterprise which has been contributing immensely to the socio-economic goals, and even today one cannot dispense away with this form of enterprise. Now, coming to the other form of enterprise called public corporation. What is this public corporation? Public corporation is the discovery or invention, I call it, of the 20th century. This has happened in the western part of the world, where there were agencies which were established by giving the ownership of the government, but the entrepreneurial spirit of the private enterprises. For example, the private sector is more flexible, more entrepreneurial, and more profit driven compared to the departmental form of enterprises. So taking a cue from those western agencies, or the agencies which are established in the western part of the world to meet the needs of the people, the public corporations were established. So what is a public corporation? How is it different from departmental form of enterprise? Departmental form of enterprise, as stated earlier, is owned by government, and the public corporation is also owned by government. Then what is the difference? The difference is the way it is established. A public corporation is established by the law of the parliament. In fact, it is a statutory body which is established by the majority of the by taking into consideration the majority vote of the parliament. So basically, it is a statutory body, and all the objectives, mission, fulfillment, goals are established in the statute itself. So it is a statutory body, and the best part of this public corporation is it is given operational freedom, which is not much found in departmental form of enterprise. So what are the basic features of this one? As stated earlier, it is a special act through which the public corporation is established. It enjoys a separate legal entity which does not happen in departmental form. Departmental form is a part and parcel of the government. It functions directly at the ministry, and all issues, all the directives, all the controls are regulated by the government of India. Whereas in this case, the public corporation is a separate legal entity which can be sued in the court of law, and the public corporation enjoys freedom and autonomy in day-to-day operation, in case of recruitment, appointment, promotion, transfer, etc., which is again not found in the earlier one. The capital is provided by the government. Initial capital to establish and run the public corporation is established by the government. That's the biggest advantage. So once it is established by the government, the owner is the government, but the operational freedom is given to the public corporation, and there is a separate board of directors to run the public corporation. The board is again nominated by the government from time to time to ensure that there is some sort of balance between specialists, journalists, control, guidance, and overall effectiveness. So the board of directors provides the overall policy direction to the public corporation. Each public corporation is headed by a chairman and a director. The chairman and director acts like the CEO of the company and takes all the decisions pertaining to the corporation. However, they are subjected to the board of control, the board of directors, from time to time. As stated earlier, the financial and operational freedom is the biggest advantage of this one. Some of the merits are, these public corporations are run on commercial lines, in the sense that they are established with specific social purpose. However, there is some element of profit attached to that, which is not possible in departmental form, in the sense that if we take the road transport corporation agencies in all the states, they are established on the same line, in the sense that they are public corporations. They are public corporations. They have a social goal as well as profit orientation, in the sense that they combine societal obligations as well as commercial obligations. Both the obligations are put under the corporation banner, which is not possible in departmental form. And as stated earlier, this is the government owned, completely owned by government. Although it is run on the commercial lines, it is owned by the government, and there is a clear role, very clear role for these corporations to provide the service as well as to generate profit. They cannot depend on government from time to time. They have clear policy agenda with regard to social obligations and profit. However, one thing which is another importance is this control part. Even though they have board of directors and also the CMD, they are also controlled by government, partly to some extent through their boards, because these public corporations are also governed by the Comptroller and Auditor General rules. The audit of the public corporations is done by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, which means that the Comptroller of Auditor General of India lays the report before the Parliament, which can be scrutinized by the parliamentarians and discuss the issues pertaining to the effectiveness and efficiency of these public enterprises. So these are some of the merits. However, we find that the public corporations are also suffering from some of the demerits. What are the demerits? These demerits also hamper the overall effectiveness and their efficiency. Although they were established with a view to ensure that they generate profits and also meet the societal obligations, there are some demerits which have to be discussed. One of the major impediments or demerits of these public corporations is the interference from the government from time to time. Although they are given operational freedom, sometimes the ministry ensures that the public corporations meet the societal obligations which act as interference in the functioning of the public corporations. One good example is, again, if you take the Road Transport Corporation at the state level, we find that the price or the increase in rate is governed by the government of the day rather than the public corporation which runs the buses or the transportation system in the state. This hampers the overall profitability of the enterprises. And the next one is, we find the surveys show that these form of public enterprises often run into losses, and because the societal obligations and profit obligations hamper the overall effectiveness of these public corporations. One good example is, again, if you take the case of Air India, we find that it was a public corporation, and what is the state of affairs in Air India now? The societal obligations and the profitability could not go together, and over a period of time, most of the public corporations, both at the central level and state level, have gone into losses. However, one should not assume that all these public corporations are under losses. There are many public corporations which have been running excellently. For example, if you take NTPC, BHEL, SAIL, they are making huge profits, and that is the biggest advantage of these public corporations, which we should not forget. And sometimes it is criticized that public corporations have become unresponsive over a period of time, particularly in those areas where they have direct interface with the citizens and the customers. And that apart, the bureaucratic structure is one of the hampering features of these public enterprises. Since it is established the government, the controls, regulations, the culture and structure of these public enterprises or public corporations have over a period of time adopted all those features which are found in government, and over a period of time they have become bureaucratic in nature, and the very survival of these public corporations is being questioned because the bureaucratic form of structure will not help the public corporations in meeting the challenges of liberalization, privatization and globalization. Therefore, there is a need for public corporations to ensure that they shed away the bureaucratic controls, structures, so that they become more agile and responsive to meet the customer needs. One good example, again, if you take Air India, should become more responsive to the needs of the customers from time to time. The last form of enterprise is government company. Government company is very simple to establish. It does not require parliamentary approval from time to time. Okay, so the government company can be established by an executive order. Simple. A cabinet committee or a cabinet can meet and pass a resolution that itself can pave way for the establishment of a government company. It is as simple as that. So this is the reason why the government has exploited this clause and helped in the establishment of many government companies, and many government companies have been established with the same role, meeting the societal obligations and also ensure profitability. But all said and done, it has been found that these government companies could not make much dent in the area of their operational freedom and operational excellency. So what are features of these? The features are, as I stated earlier, the cabinet decision is essential for the establishment of a government company, and parliament approval or legislative approval is not required. It is funded and owned by the government completely, which is again a plus point, and sometimes it can become probably a minus point for the functioning of these companies. All these companies are established under the Companies Act of 1956. However, the Companies Act has been revived, so the student should know the latest Companies Act. And the best part of this one is the flexibility in operations in day-to-day, as in public corporations. As public corporations have day-to-day operational freedom, these companies have also the operational freedom to carry out their tasks. However, there are some challenges for all these forms of enterprise, whether it is departmental firm or public corporation or government company. What are the challenges in the recent past? After 1991, all these forms of enterprise have started facing the wave of liberalization, privatization and globalization. So privatization is one of the important factors which is impinging or which is impacting the overall performance of these public enterprises. If we take the private sector is making waves or making roads into all those areas which were earlier the monopoly of the public enterprises. One good example can be the ordnance factories, as I've stated earlier. Now even the private companies are slowly entering into the domain of preparing arms and ammunition, which was not earlier the case. This is one of the challenges. And the other challenge is globalization. Globalization has helped many MNCs to enter into the country, and they are establishing their offices and units, which again is a challenge being posed by them. If we take the case of finance sector, banking sector, we find that many banks have come to India, and the private banks are doing more effective and efficient work compared to public sector banks. Now if we take the Indian Overseas Bank or State Bank of India or Canara Bank, their NPAs are increasing, which is not a good sign. Whereas we take the private sector banks, their NPAs are less compared to public sector. This is one of the challenges, and the technology, the structure, the culture they bring into the country is indeed good compared to our public sector banks. Right? Next, coming to public-private ownership, it is one of the new areas again which is emerging in the country. So this can be one of the challenges for these public enterprises, in the sense that they have to go for some sort of collaboration. Without collaboration, they cannot survive in the 21st century, particularly in the area of knowledge economy. And it is also found that there is a drain of human resources from public enterprises to the private enterprise, particularly the MNCs. The studies show that the people who are skilled in various domains in public enterprise are slowly moving to private sector for higher salaries, for better career prospects and other flexibility options which they enjoy in private sector, which is not possible in the public enterprise firms. That apart, one of the challenges which needs to be addressed by these public enterprise is the bureaucracy and red tapeism. Unless and until they cut down, they'll not be able to survive given the changes which are rapidly taking place in and around the world through the internet technology and other technologies which are emerging from time to time. Now it is time for these different forms of public enterprises shed their poor performance and also reinvigorate themselves and also find some sort of meaning for their existence and also diversify into different areas. Now we can state that different forms of public enterprises have contributed differently to the country. Government corporations have helped the country in some small specific areas of operation, be it central level or state level. Public corporations have been able to address some of the areas where the government corporation cannot fulfill obligations. For example, public corporations have been able to operate on a wider scale compared to government corporations, and they have been running profitably very fortunately. And departmental form public enterprises are basically established to cater to the larger interest of the society. So one should understand that these public enterprise or different forms of public enterprise are meant to address the different needs of the country, and to a large extent they have succeeded. And I can assure you that these departmental form public enterprise will sustain in the future. However, they need to shed their bureaucratic and red tape culture and structure, and they become agile to meet the competition in the era of liberalization, privatization and globalization. I thank you very much for listening to the lecture on different forms of public enterprises.